Ladino, also called Judeo-Spanish or Judesmo, is a Romance language of Sephardic Jews based on Old Castilian Spanish and written in the Hebrew script. In the 14th century, it was the linguistic form of biblical translations into Castilian Spanish. It was an active spoken language for 2 generations in the Ottoman Empire after the Iberian expulsions. However, some of the speakers considered that the term is incorrect, thinking of Ladino rather as the semi-sacred language used in word-by-word translations from the Bible, but not the spoken vernacular language. So the spoken vernacular language, as I said, is called Judeo-Espanol, Sephardi, Judeo, Judío-Espanol, or Espanol-Sefardita, or Judesmo, meaning like the Jewish language. But it's also considered offensive by some native speakers to call it the Jewish language. And that term was not so well known in the native press. In the late 19th and 20th century, Judeo-Spanish was spoken widely in the Balkans and was a language of the press, literature, theater, music, poetry, balladry, and folktales. The language was also used in synagogue liturgy and in Israel and Spain in radio news broadcasts. More than 100,000 native speakers were annihilated in the Holocaust. In Auschwitz, there's a plaque that 250,000 Ladino, Judeo-Spanish speakers were annihilated. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration. After secular modern Turkification in 1924, in Turkey the language appeared in Latin characters and lost all of its Hebrew written elements. In Israel, the language was greatly weakened with the dominance of mandated modern Hebrew. In the Americas, the language gave way to English or Spanish after 2 generations. The dialect of the Oran area of Algeria was called Tetuani, after the Moroccan city of Tetuan, since many Iranian Jews came from there. In Hebrew, their dialect is called Spaniolit. And then Hakatiya is the dialect from Spanish Morocco of Judeo-Spanish in communities like Tetuan or Tangier. In this table I have here, you have the various scripts. You'll see in block letters, in regular Hebrew typeset, you have the far left. In modern Hebrew, the language is written in Ashkenazi cursive. In the third column to the left is the Rashi print script, which was hardly used because people didn't write that way. But that's how, if you wrote what was in typeset, that's how you would write it. In Salotreo is the written cursive of Judeo-Spanish, and it looks like Arabic, okay? And it's very deceptive because, for example, look at the difference between Aleph on top, and then go down and look at the difference between Lamed somewhere in the middle. And then look at the difference between Resh. And not everyone wrote exactly in this style, in this uniformity, so it can be very confusing. And then in the other tables you have the Greek and Latin and phonetic equivalents. Here's an example of the Rashi typescript in a novel published in Jerusalem in 1900. If there's a Hebrew date, you add 240, and that's when you get the Gregorian year. The title is Arrivador de los Muertos, the arrival of the dead. And then you see how it's written. There are accents. For example, at the end of the third line, there's the third to the left word is saver, meaning to know. But notice the third letter to the left is a bet. But notice it has that little accent on it, which makes it a vet. These are some features of the printed language. Here's a table, for example, of Salotreo. You can focus in on some of the letters. Notice, like, for example, the Gimel, let's say the fourth letter, it becomes a ch when there's a diacritic mark on it, okay? And then you have let's say the sixth letter here is Dalid. but that could easily be mixed up with resh. Okay? And then also, for example, you have zayin, which is the second to the bottom. But if you put a diacritical mark, then it's pronounced as zh. And so it's very confusing to decipher all this in handwritten documents. So there are various dialects, depending on the place, like Salonika, Monastir, Istanbul, Rhodes, Bosnia, Romania, and Hakkatia in Spanish Morocco. In Salonika, the language had more Castilian, Old Spanish, medieval, Latinized forms. In modern Spanish, to do is azer, written H-A-Z-E-R. In Judeo-Spanish, in most dialects, let's say in Rhodes it was azer. In Salonika, you add an F for fazer. It's not like Portuguese, though. It's old medieval Castilian Spanish. And then in like Bosnia and Romania, you had like a U instead of an I, or diacritical marks like a U instead of an U. And so these are the different features of the dialects, and to someone who speaks a different dialect, it's kind of funny, and they would ridicule the person who spoke differently from them. And that's one reason also why Sephardim were divided. They had different tunes in synagogue, they knew different tunes, they came from different cities, they had a different past, but they spoke the language a little different. Those that lived in Turkey may have a lot more Ottoman Turkish influences in words and changes in the grammar, as opposed to, let's say, someone from Romania, and et cetera, et cetera. So the language, that's just a glimpse. It's not hard to actually read the written language. It's very difficult to read handwritten Solid Trail.